Welcome back. This is part 3 of a 5-part series that we've put together for beginners in floral design and floral art. Today we're going to actually do some work with flowers. We're going to look at a couple of very basic ways that you can put flowers together using just a few flowers. We're not going to try and incorporate a big bunch of flowers. You'll actually see the method that I have used over many years. My mother first showed me this. We used to sell flowers at the farm gate, the flowers that we grew at the farm. And this was her easy way of putting bunches together so that people could buy them and take them home and plonk them straight into a vase. They were her words. And so it's a very useful method for you to learn when you're first starting out. We're going to use the cut glass vase that I showed you in one of the previous videos about how to actually section it off so you can use it to put placements in very carefully. We're not going to use that system today, it's just the vase as it is. But what we need to look at is that this is a very traditional vase, a very traditional shape. So the shape of it, the issue often with people who buy flowers or get given flowers and they put them in a vase is that they never feel like it looks right. Sometimes that can simply be because there's too many flowers in a vase, so separate them out, use them in a few different ones. You can have a line of them if you wanted to, but make sure that you're not overcrowding the vase. I've heard people say that every flower should have a face and every face should be seen. So you need to see the individual flowers, not just this mass of floral material. So let's look at the method first of all, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it fits into the vase when we get to doing the vase. So what you want to start with, basically we're going to create a fan shape. So we want to start with our big foliage, our back foliage first of all. So we would normally have 3. One very large one that we're going to place in the centre, and then one either side. And just a little note as we start to do the design, is that you'll see that I've actually trimmed the bottom of these stems. And that's because once it goes into water, if we leave the leaves on it, the water will discolour and the fungus and bacteria will start to spread their wings within the water, and that's what makes it smelly. So we don't want any of the leaf material below the water line that's going to be in the vase. So we would normally just pull the leaves off so that you've got some clean stems. Because one of these stems is a little bit shorter and thinner than the others, I'm actually going to add 2 on that side. So what we have, just clear the ants off the table. What we have is that basic triangle shape at the top that gives us the fan. And then we simply use that as the basis and we layer other things on it. So now what I want is a little bit more green material to fill in those gaps. And I've chosen I picked some fern off the back step, and you'll see the photos of where it was on the back step. Because all of this material is stuff that I've just gone out and picked from either the farm or the garden. Now, what's at the farm now is just things that we use, that we don't grow it commercially anymore. What I want you to notice when I put these in is that this has got a natural shape. So it's tilting in one direction. Make sure that you use that in your design. So don't put it on the other side just because you would normally work from left to right. Look at it in the design and make sure it's going to sit comfortably that way. So we've got one, fortunately, that moves in the other direction. So we put that one there. And now I'm looking at those and I'm thinking the bottom of those is going to be below the water line. So we'll just strip them off. And I have a handy bin here underneath the table. It's at the other end. So I'll just put those out of the way. I'll clean them up later, I promise. And just as you're putting this together, just keep your hand on it so you can see the shape that it's going to be when it's finished. I thought I had another one. And this one's got quite a kink in it, so I'm going to actually put it on the side and perhaps twist it around some of the other plant material that's there. It's a matter of playing with this stuff and getting it to a point where you're happy with how it's sitting. Now we're going to add in some plant material. Now we have, and this is the way we always used to do it, we have a feature, tallest one goes in the centre. That gives you, again, you're looking at triangle diamond shapes. These are dahlias from the farm, and dahlias notoriously have a mind of their own about which way they turn. So again, it's looking at if the curve goes that way, make sure you put it so it's going to sit comfortably in your group, in your grouping. That one's a little bit shorter, so it can come down there. And we've got the fourth one, because it's a different colour, it becomes the bottom feature. So now we've got the first lot of our floral placements, and we're only using four flowers. So if you got given a bunch of flowers, or if you bought one at the supermarket and there was 10 stems in it, you're going to be able to get at least 2 vases out of that particular investment in plant material. If you're going out into the garden, you know you only have to pick 2, 3, 4 or 5, and sometimes only one, which we'll see in the next design. Now what we need, you look at it now, it's okay, but it's got lots of gaps in it. So we want something that is a filler material, and ideally you want something that's got a little bit of foliage as well, because that will add bulk to your design. And you just slip them in. Again, it's a matter of trial and error, see what you're comfortable with, what fills out the design for you. Don't be afraid to play with it and to move things around. One of the issues we often have with gardeners is that they get very upset about how we might manipulate plant material and how we cut things up as designers to fit a particular design. But in this case, we're just moving the plant material around till we get a sort of a pleasing grouping of what's there. And because I would like to feature that a little bit more, I'll bring one down so it can be seen a little bit better. Now we've still got a gap at the top here, so I'm going to have to find some other foliage that's got a little bit of height and will give the design a little bit better look. So I have, she said, referring to her extra bucket, this is a plant called woolly bush. It's an Australian native, and I have a reputation for using it in everything that I do. It's a very hardy plant. It's a native of Western Australia, so quite happy to be in desert conditions. But we have it growing out in full sun, we get frosts and all the rest of it. So what we want to do is just fill that gap with something. You could go back out and you could pick more of this foliage that we've used and fill it in that way. But at this stage, I will just use the woolly bush to fill out that spot. Now I've also got some gardenia because I'm feeling, when I look at the vase, what I'm looking for is a shape that's going to mirror that. So I want to have it wide-ish there, and come up to a point so that it looks like, again, we're looking at that diamond shape, so 2 triangles. Essentially, if you're looking at a traditional arrangement, you'll see that mostly they work in a geometric shape of some description. So a diamond, a triangle, a circle, a crescent. And that's the sorts of things that you would see in churches or in very formal settings, rather. So what our eye does is look at the shape and wants to match it. So if you imagine that you had store-bought or been given flowers and you just cut the stems off and dump them in, they would spread out and they would give you more of a circular shape. So it's not going to, our eye is going to say, it's not quite right, I don't know what's wrong with it. And that's often why people feel like they can't do anything with flowers, because they're not looking at the whole picture. So look at the shape of the vase that you're using and try to match that in some way with the plant material that you're using. So as I said, I want a little bit more depth out this way to give it the triangular diamond shape. So I'm going to use, these are off the gardenia that is flowering once again. It's one of those plants that just continues to flower in our garden regardless of time of year. So when I'm doing this, it's April, and it was out in full flower in November of last year, and it's come through to a second flowering now. So what I've done with that now is just filled out the sides a little bit more, so it's got a little bit more body to the sides there. And then I just want to put a little bit of a feature here to make it interesting. And this is another Australian native. This is a coastal rosemary, and the flower is the wrong colour. So this is the thing that gardeners and the plant purists get horrified at. I'm just going to pull the flower off because I don't want it to ruin the colour scheme that's there, and it's a little bit tiny anyway for this size of design. But the other thing that you need to keep in mind is the scale and the proportion of what you're doing, because that's another thing that our eye will say is not quite right. It's out of balance, or just doesn't look right. It's probably our best reaction, and that can often be because the plants are too big or too small for the area that you're working in. So just a few things to keep in mind, but don't get overwhelmed by these things. Just keep trying, just keep giving it a go, and you'll start to see what works and what doesn't work. Now, we're at this point, we've been holding it in our hand all along. What are we going to do to make sure it stays that way for when we put it in the vase? Elastic band. So what I will do first of all is just trim some of these stems so that I can get the elastic band on without too much difficulty. Beauty of the elastic band, rather than string or anything else, is that the elastic band will adjust with the amount of water that the stems are taking up. And if you're using things that you want to dry out rather than stay hydrated or stay fresh, then it will also shrink. So if you're drying lavender, for instance, I would always recommend that you use a hair scrunchie or elastic bands, because the elastic band will adjust as the lavender loses its moisture and dries out. That will adjust as well. So we just trim, and in this case, because the vase has got that conical shape, we might want to trim so that it fits comfortably in that shape. If we cut them all across, then the stems are going to stop halfway, not look as nice. So again, it's about thinking about the vase that it's going in. Sorry about the noise, but these will be big stems. And you'll notice that I'm actually cutting on an angle for all of these stems, because that gives the plant the most surface area to take up the water. So there we've got, you can see there that it's a triangular shape, because that's going to fit into the vase better. I used the pink rubber band, I will say, so that you could see it, but if it was going into the house somewhere, then I would use something that's a little bit more neutral. I might use green, or I might use the standard colours. So then all we need to do, put it in the vase. Now that's obviously still too long in the stems for this vase, because we want the plant material to sit on the edge of the vase. So we're going to have to trim it down a little bit further. That's okay. It's all about trial and error to get it right. It's like when you have your hair cut and they say, "You happy with that?" And you say, "Oh no, I'd like a bit more off. A bit more would be good." And there we go. So there it is. So that could go up against a wall quite comfortably. I'm just adjusting that so that it stands up in the design. So what you have there is a nice traditional design, mirrors the shape of the vase that it's in, The height is something else that our eyes will tell us is not quite right. So what we're looking for is at least 1.5 times the height of this vase. So we go 1, and this is actually 2, so it's a good height, a comfortable height for us to look at and feel like it's a good design. So we'll put that one against the wall, and that's as hard as it gets. Quite honestly, if you master that technique of getting the foliage down first, your backing foliage down first, and then just playing with the layers of the material, don't try and put too much in it, and then just see and play around with it. Leave that for a day or so. The dahlias will probably get a bit tired, pull them out, put something else in. But you'll notice that the dahlias, because of the size of that bloom, balance that material out. If you had roses, you would need more, because they're just not as big until they're open. They're just not as big a surface area for your design. So let's clean up this mess, and we'll have a look at something else that is using one of the containers that we talked about earlier. So this time we've got a container that's far more contemporary or modern looking than our cut glass vase. It's a jar, and in the earlier video where we talked about containers, we covered the base of this one with a balloon just to give us a bit more colour. What we're going to do is put it with a little bit of driftwood to give it that sort of modern look. And then we're going to add some plant material in here. We'll keep the lid, as I said. Sometimes that can be very useful for smaller parts of a design that you might want to just feature. And it finishes off the design, whereas if we just had it with there, it will just look like a bit of driftwood with a vase beside it. But with that, it gives it another dimension, means something more than just here's a bit of wood and here's some things in a vase. So for this one, I'm going to use some plant material. See, to me, it's beachy. So I'm thinking about the beach and what sort of things look as though they would come from the coastline. And here in Australia, of course, we have Banksia. We have a lot of material that does actually grow on the coastline. So today I'm featuring some Banksias, and I've picked these ones that are green in colour because I think that better works with the theme that I'm thinking about. You could put some shells across the bottom here and put some other material in the shells, but I like the idea of the driftwood. I'm just cutting off. Some of these leaves are quite eaten away, and it actually then gives me more of a face on the Banksia to be able to use. And for this one, oops, I'm supposed to be putting them on the towel so it doesn't make so much noise. So because this has a natural bend forward, I want to make sure that I use that as part of the design. Move this over so it doesn't make so much noise. Now, another important thing about the Banksia is that it doesn't really require water. You can use water with it, but it doesn't take it up terribly well because it's such a woody stem. And this is something that you could probably remember for anything that is a woody stem, a hard stem, is that it's very difficult for it to take up water through that stem from a water source like we might have in a vase. So the best thing to do is to hit it with a hammer, to flatten it out with a hammer, and that opens up the capillaries within the stem so that it can take up more water. just a little insider trick for you for today. So we're going to put, again, that one's got a little bit of a bend over. What I want to do, remember we talked in this one about looking at your container and balancing it out for your eyes. So this has got a lot of what we could call visual weight. On this side, there's a big area to look at. We want to bring our eyes around the design and incorporate all of the design, not just have it, oh, there's that big bit of wood there, and there's these other things here. So that's why I've placed that one facing out that way, so that it gives it a little bit more of a balance for our eyes. Now we've got a little bit of foliage that we can cut up to put in the back. What will happen as this dries is that these leaves will go quite a pale green, almost silvery green, and they can stay like that. They look like beach umber, see? That's the look I'm going for. So now we have our completed design with the plant material that we picked from the garden today, and we've got a nice shape. What I'd like you to think about now is extending your thought process around the design that you've done now, thinking about this lovely bit of wood. It's actually a root from a tree that came down. Think about that shape. Think about what else you've seen around the garden that might be that shape that we could add to the design that's not necessarily fresh, but will give it another dimension in terms of looking at it and tell a different story about the design. So what I picked up along the way was this leaf. Now this is a Strelitzia leaf that has just died. I'll show you the bird of paradise for those of you who have it in the garden. That's what it looks like when it's on the plant. And if you let them just die back, you'll see them on the plant. They die back in this wonderful, wonderful shapes, all different. Don't have to cut them, don't have to dry them any particular way. You can just leave them on the plant and then just go searching in the plant to find one that you like. So I've cut the stem off because I don't need it, and I'm simply going to place it around. What it does with this design, we'll just move it a little bit further around. Play with it a bit till you're happy with how it looks. What it does is bring that brown colour across to the other side of the design, so our eyes are comfortable with the rhythm of that colour. It also mirrors the shapes, the waveforms that we're seeing in this piece of wood, and gives that dimension to the other side without the mirroring the shape of the foliage. The last thing that I'd like to do with that, because for me, the shiny glass stands out a little bit too much. So I've gone and trimmed the old man's beard, not the old man that lives here, but the plant, the old man's beard, Tillandsia. And that, because it looks a little bit like, you might see the sea, a little bit of driftwood, a little bit softens the design. It matches the back of these leaves, so we're keeping in colour, and just tuck it in a few places so that it looks like, softens that glass. For me, it softens the glass, the shiny glass, and it just finishes off the design. And these are the little things that you might see in designs that you wouldn't necessarily think of straight away when you're doing a design. So there we have our more modern / contemporary design, just using things that you found around the garden. In the next video, we're going to go back to one of the containers that we looked at in the container video, where we used tape to make a grid over a vase. And I'm also going to show you how to use a turntable. If you've got the turntable, the Lazy Susan, I'm going to be using that because this is the design that we do will be one that can be viewed all around. But for now, for this video, here are our two options for things you pick from the garden, just using a minimal amount of plant material.